Hey guys, this is your Aquatic Biomes video notes, so just make sure you're going through and you're taking notes with the guided notes as you go through this presentation. Pay special attention to things that I bring up via audio and make sure you add additional notes when necessary. These items will be on your assessments in the future. So before you get started, go ahead and write your aim down at the top. What are the characteristics of aquatic biomes? All right, so a little review here. Just review of the term biome. Large geographical areas that have similar climates and ecosystems are known as biomes. All right, so looking at aquatic biomes, water is the common link among aquatic biomes, and it makes up nearly 70% of the Earth's surface, making it the largest part of our biosphere. So scientists also think the aquatic biomes are where life began billions of years ago. And take a moment and read these different factors here and identify whether they are biotic or abiotic. So read those over, pause the video. All right, so these factors are actually abiotic. Again, biotic things were never alive, whereas biotic things were either alive or once were alive. Without water, most forms of life would be unable to sustain themselves, and the Earth would be a barren, desert-like place. The aquatic biome can be broken down into two basic regions, freshwater and marine. So in this presentation, we're going to go through freshwater, and then we will look at marine separately. So let's start with freshwater biomes. Freshwater is defined as having a low salt concentration, usually less than 1%. Plants and animals in freshwater regions are adjusted to the low salt content and would not be able to survive in a high salt content such as the ocean. All right, there are different types of freshwater regions. These regions include things like rivers and streams, lakes and ponds, and wetlands. All right, so looking at rivers and streams, these are flowing freshwater environments, and they can vary from small brooks to large, slow-moving rivers. Currents can quickly wash away loose particles downstream, leaving rocky or a gravelly bottom. So how do rocks get to the bottom of the stream? This concept is called deposition, as you see noted here on the screen. All right, still looking at rivers and streams. So as the water tumbles and splashes, air from the atmosphere mixes in. So naturally fast-flowing streams usually have clearer water and higher oxygen content than slower flowing streams. So that just goes around, go back to the top statement, where the water tumbles and splashes and the air mixes in. So this is how it has a higher higher air content. So most of the nutrients that support life in flowing water ecosystems are washed into the water from the land, and in areas where the water movement slows, debris settles to the bottom through deposition. So this is where you start to have the muddy, sooty bottom, like what you see in rivers and streams around us a lot of times, or creeks. So rivers and streams, these environments tend to have high nutrient levels and more plant growth. So both in the water and around the rivers and streams, they usually contain organisms that are not well adapted to the swiftly flowing waters, such as mussels, minnows, and leeches. All right, so moving to lakes and ponds. So when a low place in the land fills with rainwater, snowmelt, or water from an overflowing stream, lake or pond, a lake or pond might form. So this is kind of like what we have, Logan Martin Lake, except ours is formed with the dam. So a pond or lake, the water hardly moves. So it contains more plants than flowing water environments can contain, simply because, again, it's not moving. Or if it is moving, it's very slow moving. So there's not any pressure on the plants to set down roots. So they're able to grow a lot faster. All right, so let's break these apart. So lakes are generally larger and deeper than ponds. Lakes do not contain as much plant life. Can you guess why? Well, obviously, if it's deep, your sunlight can't reach it. So plants prefer to grow in shallower, warmer locations where sunlight reaches. Again, plants grow with and use photosynthesis. So without sunlight, they're not going to grow very much. So still looking at lakes, colder temperatures and lower light levels limit the amount of types of organisms that can live in deep water lakes. So floating in the warm, sunlit waters near the surface of freshwater lakes and ponds are microscopic algae plants and other organisms known as plankton. And if you look in the image here, you can see large amounts of it all over the lake in the picture below. All right, so now looking at ponds, these are generally small, shallow bodies of water. They're not very deep. Ponds are filled with animals and plant life because they're shallow. Why do you think that is? Well, it breaks it down here. The warm sunlit waters promotes growth of algae and plants. This in turn turns into food for other fish, in which are in turn food for larger fish. So, in fact, many ponds are filled almost completely with plant material. So only clear, open water is at the center, where it's normally the deepest. All right, so ponds tend to be high in nutrients because of the lush plant growth. So pond animals include things like fish, crayfish, tadpoles, ducks, insects, raccoons, earthworms, etc. So you can kind of look at the little picture below, and it breaks it down the pond ecosystem in a visual way. All right, so lakes and ponds are broken down into two zones primarily. The littoral zone, which is the shoreline. This is a very nutrient-rich and diverse area, so it's going to have a lot of plants and a lot of nutrients for the animals and plants to grow. The beatnik zone, or the benthic zone, it receives little sunlight, and animals live off of the decaying matter that falls to the bottom. So this could be coming from the littoral zone, or things that fall from the sky, or things that die at the higher in the surface as it's swimming along the lake or pond. All right, so with everything else, we're going to have to come back and look at pollution. We often harm our freshwater environments through the use of different items and our activities that we pursue. So looking at agriculture here, for instance, it's just talking about fertilizer runoff from farms and lawns, and also includes the sewage waste dumped into the water, which can lead to excessive growth or algae in plants in lakes and ponds. So this is literally talking about how those ponds that you see going around, especially in the country areas around farms, you'll see turn like blue-green with an algae bloom. This is what this shows. So the growth and decay of these organisms reduce the oxygen level in the water, which makes it difficult for some organisms to survive. So to prevent problems, sewage needs to be treated before it is released. People also need to be educated about problems associated with polluting lakes and ponds, and also fines and penalties are normally issued to people caught polluting our waterways. All right, looking at our next type of aquatic biome, we are looking at the wetlands. So wetlands are regions that are wet for all or almost the entire year. These regions are found in areas that lie between land masses and water. So this is kind of like that intermediate zone. Other names for wetlands include things like bogs, swamps, and fens. These are often very fertile ecosystems, but only plants that are adapted to waterlogged soil survived. So literally, this is talking about how, like, if you overwater plants, they'll die. So the plants that live here can't be prone to having issues with excess water. All right. Wetland animals include things like beavers, muskrats, alligators, and the endangered bog turtle, along with other things, but that's just what it's showing here. So wetlands once were considered useless and disease-ridden places. Many of these wetlands were drained and destroyed to make roads, farmland, shopping centers, and housing developments. Only recently have people begun to understand the importance of wetlands. Products that come from wetlands include fish, shellfish, cranberries, plants, and are valuable resources. And another thing, wetlands provide protection from flooding. So now many developers are restoring wetlands, and in most states, access to land through wetlands the word is cut off, but it is prohibited. This is just a mark here. We're going to go back later and we're going to watch this Planet Earth episode on freshwater, but not at this point. All right, so freshwater biomes. So we're done with the freshwater stuff and moving on to saltwater. About 95% of the water on the Earth's surface is considered saltwater, and it contains high concentrations of various salts. The amounts of dissolved salts in water is known as salinity. Saltwater biomes include oceans, coral reefs, and estuaries. Marine algae supply much of the world's oxygen supply and takes up a huge amount of atmospheric carbon dioxide. So through photosynthesis, the plant-based microbe will do photosynthesis, produce oxygen, take in carbon dioxide. So the evaporation of the seawater provides rainwater for the land. So that's just the water cycle. We'll talk more about that in the future. So we're going to go through the different areas of these saltwater biomes. The first one we're going to look at is the open ocean. So the open ocean, or the plagueid zone, consists of everything in the ocean outside of the coastal areas. Scientists divide up the ocean into different life zones based on the depth which sunlight penetrates in the water. So take a moment and take a look at the different zones. We'll be looking at each of them individually as we go through the rest of this presentation. All right, so open ocean zone number 1, the first zone indicated here. This zone is best known to humans because this is where we can dive easily. So scuba diving and many marine mammals are also found here. This area is packed with ocean life because the sunlight easily penetrates the surface. So see a lot of plants, see a lot of fish in this zone. All right, the next zone indicated here, this is known as the twilight zone. This zone meets the first zone, or the highest zone, and this zone becomes very dark as the depth increases. Animals in this zone produce bioluminescence, or light. So notice the little anglerfish from Finding Nemo. That's an example of the type of fish that inhabit this zone. So not all fish do this, but this is a commonly used method to attract prey. All right, so more on this zone. Because nutrients in this zone are limited, some animals rise to the top of this zone at night for food. So again, there's no plant life here, so there's not a lot of nutrients and stuff in this zone. So they pretty much have to catch something that's swimming or something that falls from the zone above it. So many animals in this zone can eat animals larger than themselves because they are equipped with large, sharp teeth with expandable jaws and stomachs. All right, so the third zone indicated up here. So animals in this zone rely on waste material, and this new word here, detritus. This stands for waste or debris of some kind, for food, or on eating other animals in this zone. So there's no plant life here to produce food, so they have to rely on what they can find. At this depth and pressure, the animals that are most likely found, or most commonly found, are fish, mollusks, crustaceans, and jellyfish. Sperm whales have often been known to hunt in these depths on occasion to prey on the giant squid. All right, still looking at the third zone here. So black and red are the predominant colors of animals here, and any bioluminescence is usually blue since red is not visible at these depths. The most common mollusk in this zone are the vampire squid, an animal that can turn itself inside out to use its spiky tentacles to deter predators or capture prey. So that's a cool adaptation. All right, so the fourth zone indicated here. So there are only a few organisms adapted to survive in this zone, since this zone is located 4,000 meters or below to the bottom of the ocean, with freezing temperatures and incredibly high pressures. So animals in this zone include basket stars, sea pigs, and sea spiders. So what you see here are basket stars, and we'll look at another picture in a moment that's going to show the sea pigs. All right, so the fifth zone indicated here, this is the Howell zone. This one's the easiest to pronounce. So deeper than the previously mentioned zone here and these are canyons and submarine trenches that make up this zone. So animals capable of living at these depths include some species of squid, such as the deep water squid and octopus, as you see in the... All right, so take a moment, take a look at the slide here. This breaks down the different zones from the top zone, which is up here, this first zone, second zone, third zone, fourth zone, fifth zone. So pay attention to the depths here. So you've got light in this first area, light penetrates to this area, but not as much. And again, notice the black zones. There's no light in these last three zones. All right, so we went through each of the zones. Now let's look at some different ecosystems that make up our oceans. So the first one we're gonna look at is coral reefs. These are the most diverse ecosystems in the world. Coral live in shallow, warm water, again, has to have sunlight. So coral reefs are formed over long periods of time from calcium carbonate skeletons secreted by animals called coral. When the coral die, their skeletons remain, and new coral build on top of the remains of the old coral. And here's just a vibrant picture of a coral reef. All right, so another type of ecosystem is called an estuary. So almost every river on the earth eventually flows into the ocean. The area where the river meets the ocean contains a mixture of freshwater and saltwater. We call this an estuary. This type of water is called brackish water, which is a mixture of salt and freshwater. Other names for estuaries include things like bays, lagoons, harbors, inlets, and sounds. They are located near coastlines and border the land. Salinity in estuaries change with the amount of fresh water brought in by the rivers and streams. And as you work your way farther up the estuary, you'll notice generally your freshwater concentration increases as you get closer to the mouth of the river. So estuaries are extremely fertile, productive eco environments because freshwater streams bring in tons of nutrients washed from inland soils. Organisms found in estuaries include many species of algae, salt-tolerant grasses, shrimp, crabs, clams, oysters, snails, worms, and fish. Estuaries provide much of the seafood consumed by humans. All right, here you'll see some pictures of some different estuaries around the world. So you'll see both of these commonly in our south coast at Gulf Shores. You can see this one from the main beach at Gulf Shores. You can see this one at the state park. All right, so let's take a moment real quick and answer this question. Try to answer this on your own. You can refer back to your notes if needed. What are the 4 important abiotic factors in freshwater ecosystems? Pause the video and try to answer this. All right, so you should have gotten 3 things. Number 1, temperature. Number 2, light. Number 3, amount of salt. And number 4, dissolved oxygen. All right, why is it fewer plants are at the bottom of deep lakes? Pause the video, try to answer it. All right, well, like we mentioned in the saltwater part, ocean does not reach the bottom of deep lakes or deep bodies of water, period, when we're referring to the oceans. All right, last 2 questions here. Which of the following is composed of a mixture of salt and fresh water? So I eliminated the multiple choice. Take a moment, pause the video, and just which environment is composed of a mix of saltwater and freshwater? All right, so the answer to that would be estuary. You should have that on your paper. And what type of water is this called? So what is the mixture of freshwater and saltwater called? Pause the video, take a moment to answer. This would be called brackish water. So at this point, you're going to move to your aquatic biomes practice. So once you finish that, you can submit that to the tray, and we will be getting ready for your next project to start next. So good luck. Have a good day.